This is where we start every essay. You got a blank piece of paper. So where to start off is an important question, and sometimes there's a lot of anxiety involved with this. As a student, it's really important to know what routes that you want to take, and it always starts with this blank piece of paper. Everyone has a different philosophy on pretty much anything, and writing is no exception. So there might be pundits or educators or students of writing who might disagree with me, but this is what's always worked for me. These are my suggestions. Take them at your leisure, and take them or leave them as you will. So we're going to write an essay about being a twin. My first thing that I do is I brainstorm. So an identical twin, it's pretty interesting to have an identical twin, and just to know that not that many people are identical twins. I know it's immediately going to be at least somewhat interesting to the reader. Imagining that the reader has 50 essays to read, and maybe they might get bored. You always want to bring something fresh. You don't. It's not about clickbait. 7 ways to do this or to do that. It's not like an internet headline, for example. This is writing an essay. So we'll go over writing an essay in terms of a research essay, a book or a play on certain themes, etc. But the very first essay I want us to focus on is something that is just focused on being a topic. So being an identical twin is pretty interesting, and that's what I wrote about in terms of my college admissions applications way back in the day. What should you write about first? Where to go with this? You want to answer obvious questions. So what are some obvious questions? We'll go through them. We'll go through some obvious questions. Do people get you mixed up? Still interesting anecdotes about that look more or less alike over time. We're now adults, so people might ask, did you ever have fun as a kid, as kids, and switch on people? Teachers, girls, etc. What else would people ask? They would ask, have you ever not wanted to be a twin? Maybe benefits, immediate, obvious benefits and drawbacks being a twin. And then also, in terms of like a story, you want to look at how to structure your essay. And one of the best ways is sort of chronological or theme, different topics about being twin, etc. That's really important. So you want to answer obvious, interesting questions that a layperson might ask. What are some other things? What are the stats on twins? And then also structuring the essay, you want to look at, say, the opening. You want to have a hook. Interesting anecdote. I'm sure you've heard this before. Paint a picture. Or interesting stat about being a twin. I remember, I think my first quote for my college acceptance or college application essay was, there are one in every, and this was years ago, I don't even know why I remember this. There was one in every 250 births. And that was it. So it's sort of, there's one what, and I don't know if those stats have changed, so I would look that up for now because that was a long time ago. So, stats on twins, identical versus fraternal, date twins, marry twins. And then obviously thinking about chronology, what about now? How has my relationship changed over time with my twin brother? And do I think that being an identical twin has had a crucial effect on that relationship evolution? So wherever the relationship is now, do I think that being an identical twin has had a crucial effect on that relationship evolution? The other thing is how to structure it. is to stay in childhood and sort of play with that time. There's nostalgia, can pull the humor. So that's another way to structure it. You can stay in childhood, sort of a snapshot, slice of life. Kind of like that movie Stand By Me with Richard Dreyfuss, narrating as an adult way later, but he's talking about him and his friends when they were kids. But we spend most of the movie focused on, when they were kids. So, but these are all decisions. It's like, okay, I can talk about chronology, being a twin and then moving on through to adulthood until now. I can focus on different topics. I can just jump from topic to topic. Maybe these interesting questions, I might break them up into 3 or 4 or 8 paragraphs and just decide what's the best way to weave them together. Or I can stay in childhood and play with that time. The other thing would be to strictly talk about adulthood, but that's less likely. I think it's less interesting because most people want to know what you did for fun as a kid in terms of identical twins. I don't think that it's as interesting to the average reader, to a layman, to be considered, to focus on that. But, that might make it a far more interesting essay because perhaps more people would write an essay that's focused on either chronology, from then until now, or that's focused strictly on, being an identical twin kid or two young people coming up. Also, what's interesting about being an identical twin, I think the reason why it goes back to being a kid is because you're forced to be around that person. It makes it even more interesting, the dynamic. So as an adult, sometimes you move away, and so it might not have as much of an effect on your identity. So your identity is very, very wrapped into being an identical twin. And that's something that maybe we can ask as well, is what percentage of your identity was wrapped up in being identical twin. Now you might not mention it, but that might be something that I talk about. And then to me, and then to others. And then just the obvious is the most interesting or humorous story or ease about being an identical twin. Misconceptions that people might have. So there's a lot here. So we're going to pull from this. Just to recap, is having an interesting topic, or to take something that might be considered droll and make it interesting by your thorough research and your nuanced perspective, or potentially having something that's pretty interesting, because not a lot of people are identical twins. I don't think it's that common. I think it's probably more common now with fertility drugs. It's probably something that I wouldn't mention, but more twins now. So this might be research. So I might say, okay, let me do some research and see if there's a greater percentage of twins and triplets, multiples now because of fertility drugs, etc. So I could do some research and see how that might have changed over time. So there's a lot of stuff here. Obviously, we would pick, and I'm actually going to walk through this entire essay starting from scratch. But here's how to start. Just to reiterate, to make sure you answer obvious, interesting questions that a lay person might ask. Think about how you're going to structure it. This is just sort of the brainstorming and just throwing it out, throwing all this stuff out there. Think about your hook. Interesting anecdote, painting a picture, or an interesting stat about being a twin. That's a good way to start.